My name is Shayna Bailey, and I'm a behavior support specialist. In today's behavior break, we're going to discuss how to effectively use feedback to improve student behavior in your classroom. This is an important strategy that should be used for all students. Let's begin by defining feedback and discussing the types of feedback that can be used. Feedback includes any information provided to a learner about the learner's performance relative to a goal or expectation. Feedback has been identified as a high leverage practice, meaning effective use of feedback is essential to effective teaching and fundamental to supporting student learning. Feedback is critical to student success in all areas, including academics and behavior. In general, there are three types of feedback that can be used. First is positive feedback. Positive feedback is given when you want to acknowledge or recognize academic, social, or other behaviors that are consistent with established goals or expectations. For example, you might say, "John, you really worked hard on that math assignment today." Or, "Class, I like how you are keeping a quiet voice and hands at your side in line." Next is instructive feedback. This type of feedback is used to make student learning more efficient by providing additional information about student behavior. For example, assume you are giving your class instructions for a group assignment. You say, "Someone tell me what you should do if you need my help." A student raises his hand and you call on him. He says, "You should raise your hand." You say, "That's exactly right. You raise your hand just like you did. It is also important to wait quietly for me to call on you or come over to your group like you did just now." Last is corrective feedback. This type of feedback is given following a behavior that does not meet expectations. Corrective feedback is given to help the student recognize that their behavior is not meeting expectations and to reteach the expected behaviors. For example, when you ask the class how to appropriately get your attention, a student calls out, "Raise your hand." You might say, "Remember to raise your hand and wait for me to call on you to answer a question. Show me how to raise your hand and wait quietly to be called on." When the student shows the expected behavior, you provide positive feedback for raising a hand and waiting to be called on. Now let's review criteria, qualities, and outcomes of effective feedback. Feedback should be contingent. This means feedback should be delivered only when a given behavior occurs. For example, assume you give a group activity to the class. 3 of your 4 groups work on the assigned task throughout the work period. One group spends the last few minutes talking about the basketball game that is scheduled for that night. At the end of the group activity, you could provide positive feedback to the 3 groups that were on task throughout the work period, but not to the group that spent time discussing the basketball game. If you were to provide positive feedback to the entire class for working hard on the assigned task throughout the work period, you would be telling the group that discussed the basketball game that their behavior met this expectation. Feedback of any type should be timely, meaning that it is provided as immediately as is possible following the occurrence of a behavior. This helps students associate your feedback to the behaviors that they engaged in. Feedback should be specific in that it describes observable behaviors that students have engaged in, as well as those behaviors that are expected. For example, assume your students repeatedly turn around in line to talk with peers during a transition to the gym. Saying, "Please lower your voice to a level 0, put your hands at your sides and face the front," is specific, but saying, "Cut it out and get in line," is not. Corrective feedback should be positively oriented in that it includes a description of behaviors a student should engage in rather than just telling the student to stop engaging in inappropriate behaviors. Feedback of any type should target behaviors or skills that will help students meet established academic or behavioral goals. Let's discuss some qualities of feedback that empowers. Feedback should focus on a student's behavior rather than on the student. For example, when a student volunteers to share her materials with a peer who left her materials at home, you might focus on the student's behavior by saying, "Thank you for sharing with Lily." That shows consideration and care for your classmate, rather than focusing on the student by saying, "Thank you for being such a kind person." All types of feedback should be given with a genuine, warm, and professional tone. Positive and instructive feedback can be given publicly or privately, depending on the preferences of the student. Corrective feedback should be given as privately as is possible. Feedback should emphasize description of student behaviors rather than adult approval. Feedback should recognize progress. For example, assume that a student has been learning to greet others. You notice that the student always greets others by saying good morning. When the student enters your classroom during the last period of the day and greets you by saying good morning, you might provide feedback by saying, "Hi, Paul. I like how you approached me, made eye contact, and said something to greet me. However, it is afternoon now. Next time, you might say, 'Hello, Miss Jones,' or 'Good afternoon.' Can you think of any other things you might say to greet others?" This feedback recognizes the progress Paul has made in learning to greet others. Feedback that meets the criteria and displays the qualities that we just discussed will increase occurrence of positive and expected behaviors, as well as decrease occurrence of problem or inappropriate behaviors at school. Effective use of positive and corrective feedback also helps teach students to be more aware of and monitor their own behaviors, as well as adjust their behaviors to meet expectations. Let's watch an example of each type of feedback. Here, the teacher provides positive feedback to the entire class during independent task time in the library. The teacher uses a genuine tone to provide immediate feedback on specific behaviors of all students in the class that are consistent with behavior expectations for independent task time in the library. Class, right now you are being very responsible by keeping quiet voices, staying in your seats, and working on your assigned tasks. Thank you. Watch the teacher provide instructive feedback during a whole group lesson. The teacher provides instructive feedback by highlighting 2 additional strategies that students might use to determine what they are supposed to be doing. Okay, we have been talking about different ways to gain information when we do not know an answer to a question or when we are confused about what we're supposed to be doing. Who wants to tell us some ways we can figure out what we are supposed to be doing when we are confused? Yes, Sarah.
You can look at what the other students around you are doing.
That's a great strategy. Thank you. Asking another student what to do or looking on the board for instructions are other strategies that you can use. In this example, the teacher provides corrective feedback to students in the cafeteria line by describing specific behaviors that the student should be engaging in. Hi girls, you are holding up the line. Please put your phone away until you are seated. Face the front and walk through the line. So far, our examples have included feedback in only one direction, from the teacher to the student. However, feedback should be a two-way exchange, from teacher to student and student to teacher. Here is an example of a student engaging in what most teachers would consider inappropriate behavior in an attempt to provide feedback to his teacher.
A YouTube video of a Duncanville high school student giving his history teacher a lesson has gone viral, and tonight has his district talking.
If you would just get up and teach them instead of handing them a freaking packet, yo. There's kids in here who don't learn like that. They need to learn face to face. You want kids to come in your class, you want them to get excited for this, you got to come in here, you got to make them excited. You want a kid to change and start doing better, you got to touch his freaking heart. Can't expect a kid to change if all you do is just tell him.
Well, that video was posted this afternoon on our Facebook page, and Channel 8's Jason Whiteley tracked down that young man for us tonight. Jason?
I had dropped out for...
Jeff Bliss says he has no regrets.
No, not at all. I believe that somebody needed to say this.
Get up and teach them.
What he told his teacher in his world history class on Monday has now been seen around the world, gone viral.
I want to see a teacher stand up and interact with the students, get involved, discuss, talk, question, and get deep into the subject.
The 90-second video begins after the teacher at Duncanville High School kicks him out of her class. Bliss told us he initially questioned why students did not have more time to prepare for the STAR test, but then he unloads on her style, critical of her passing out worksheets rather than creating lively and engaging discussions in the classroom.
You want them to get excited for this, you got to come in here, you got to make them excited. You want a kid to change and start doing better, you got to touch his freaking heart.
Jeff's mother is a teacher, but the 18-year-old tells us he really discovered the value of education when he dropped out of school for a year.
And what I soon realized was, without that education, I'm not going to make any step forward into my future.
Bliss says he didn't know a classmate recorded that rant, but he isn't embarrassed of what he said. Duncanville ISD says it is addressing this situation, and the district reiterated it wants both students and teachers to be engaging in the classroom, but the district says it thinks that Jeff Bliss likely could have expressed his concern in a more appropriate way. Bliss tells us the principal wants to meet with him on campus here tomorrow morning. So far, he has not faced any reprimands. Reporting live in Duncanville, Jason Whiteley, Channel 8 News.
Well, we are hearing from hundreds of you reacting to Jeff's rant on our Facebook page. Tell us what you think about his outburst and the school's reaction. You can join the conversation on WFAA Channel 8's Facebook page.
To avoid the type of student feedback and classroom environment you observed in this video, it is important to lay the groundwork for effective two-way feedback by creating a culture of mutual respect and commitment among students, teachers, and others in the school. Students should be encouraged to provide feedback to teachers on how helpful or unhelpful they find the teacher's instructional strategies and other supports. This could be a routine part of your classroom activities. Keep in mind that not all students will know what kinds of words to say or the tone to use when giving appropriate feedback. You may have to teach and role-play this skill with your students. A classroom environment that incorporates effective feedback from teacher to students, students to students, and students to teacher will help develop trust and positive relationships among the teacher and students. As we all know, to learn about a strategy is not enough to help us use the strategy in the classroom. Consider these 3 steps as you implement feedback that empowers in your classroom. First, all 3 of the types of feedback we discussed are important. However, for effective use of feedback, you must strive for more frequent use of positive feedback relative to corrective feedback. Second, solicit the help of peers to increase your effective use of feedback in the classroom. You might discuss strategies for implementing feedback during your grade level or content area team meetings. You might also ask a peer to observe in your classroom and provide feedback on your use of feedback. Feedback can change your behavior the same way it changes the behavior of your students. Lastly, Consider building prompts into your classroom environment to help you remember to provide positive feedback more often. For example, you could set a timer to go off every 2 or 5 minutes. The timer will signal you to find an opportunity to provide positive feedback. You could also use self-monitoring and self-management. Set a goal for use of positive feedback and take data to monitor your progress toward meeting your goal. For example, Ms. Smith teaches 4 periods of 7th grade English each day. She has set the goal of providing at least 15 positive feedback statements during each 45-minute instructional period. She uses a golf counter to record each positive feedback statement she provides throughout a class period, then records those totals between class periods. She is then able to monitor her use of positive feedback during each class period. Thank you for watching this behavior break on Feedback That Empowers. The information provided in this behavior break came from 2 books, High Leverage Practices for Inclusive Classrooms and Behavior, The Forgotten Curriculum, an RTI approach for nurturing essential life skills.